Very good morning to Pat Cannon, the president of the Ballooning Federation of America, joins us on Air Sports News. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Very well indeed. Waiting for the spring to kick in here in Toronto. We're still waiting. You're in Kansas City right now, right?
Yes, we're visiting family here in Kansas City. We just came back from the BFA's convention and symposium. The symposium was a wonderful event, and it trains people on how to put on events. So we brought people in from all over the country.
Yeah, that's where all flat, no mountains to crash into.
It was wonderful, and for the event, we had over 241 people. That's a very large number for us, and it was a great educational opportunity for us to bring speakers in from literally all over the world to talk about gas ballooning, to talk about hot air ballooning, how to put on events, and the safety aspect of all of that, which is so important to us today in ballooning.
Tell me a bit about the conversation about how to put on events. What was discussed? What you're trying to help people with there?
Well, there are a lot of technical aspects of putting on events, and a lot of them are regulatory. The regulations do specify certain types of things that you must do for events. For example, if you're going to have a competition, you should have a waiver issued by the FAA. That allows balloons to come closer to the surface around crowded areas in order to provide at least a certain amount of additional safety so the balloons are not too close overhead when they're passing over crowd line, for example, going to a target. There are also emergency plans that must be written. These emergency plans are very important because the FAA wants to know that you're prepared for any type of incident that might happen, whether it be something that happens with the balloon or something that happens in the crowd.
Right. Yeah. Your ballooning, it goes back a long way. I mean, you've recently, when did you become the president of the BFA?
I was elected president of the BFA at Albuquerque event back in October this last year. Prior to that, I had been on the board as an at-large director. My job really started with the BFA as their liaison and contact with the federal government. I have been working with the FAA for many years, and not for the FAA, but working with the FAA in different capacities. And I had more information than most people did in ballooning about how to work with the FAA. So I was brought in as a consultant to start with, was then elected to the board of directors of the Balloon Federation when Ted Watts, one of our board members, passed away of COVID.
Yeah.
And I took his place, and he was an attorney, and I'm not an attorney.
Right.
So that left me a little short in his capacity, but we made up for most of that with my knowledge and background and working with the federal government.
And being involved and helping communicate with the FAA. What's happening with Albuquerque this year? Is it calming down a little bit? What's happening with that situation?
Well, this was going to be the 50th year for Albuquerque.
Yeah.
So, in fact, they have already listed the number of people that they're going to have, and it will be well in excess of 500 balloons. I think they were looking at adding another 100 balloons for the 50th anniversary because everybody wants to be there for that.
Mm. And the FAA are backing it now? Is everything okay with the FAA?
Absolutely. We had an incident. No, I'm not going to call it an incident. We did have what looked like an incident within the protected area of the surface around the main airport at Albuquerque. As it turns out, it was not an incident at all. The airliner that took off simply asked for a little bit of a heading change because he saw a pack of balloons out in the distance. As it turned out, after the interview with the captain of that airliner, he wasn't asking for deviation because of any type of conflict. He was simply asking for a heading change to stay away from the balloons who were not in the protected airspace anyway. But that did start a process with ADSB, and I think we've got that pretty well under control now. But we continue to work from the BFA side and from the Albuquerque side because this is where it started. We're still working with the federal government to smooth over the edges of that and to make sure that we're still able to operate in different areas of the country that have this ADSB protected airspace.
Right, that's very interesting stuff. And your involvement in aviation and air sports, it's not just ballooning. You've done a lot of different things. Fixed wing. You've even been a skydiver at some point, Pat.
Yes, I was. I started in the military as a helicopter pilot in the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
And when I came back from Vietnam, I was in Fort Rucker, Alabama, doing helicopter training for those guys that were returning, and we needed to turn them into instructors.
Right.
While I was there, I got introduced to a skydiving club. It's something I always had wanted to do, and I took it up. And like me, I'm kind of competitive by nature, so I took up competitive skydiving. Traveled all over the Southeast U.S.
What decade? What year was this then, Pat? When we're talking about?
Yes, it was. This would have been when I came back from Vietnam. I came back in 1969, and I spent through about 1972 at Fort Rucker. So it would have been that era.
Were you doing accuracy, sports accuracy? Is that what you were doing?
That's what I did, was sports accuracy. Yes, and of course we were jumping right during that period of time when Steve Snyder was perfecting the flat square parachute.
Yeah.
And I've never yet flown one.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. That's what I love about these conversations. You find out so much about people. With your ballooning, when you started ballooning, was it late 70s, early 80s? You were, again, being competitive, you got into the competition side quite quickly.
It was in about 1980, and I had seen a competition. In fact, I was a helicopter pilot flying a cameraman for a ballooning competition.
Oh, yeah.
That really intrigued me, and I wound up getting into the sport with my wife, and I think we would always have done things like this as a family. Yeah. I like to involve her, so she is my crew chief, and we got involved in competition right away. So I was working my way toward the national championships at that point.
That was the early 80s. Wow, so 40 years ago.
Yes, it was quite a long time ago. So I now have my Ed Yost Master Pilot Award, which is issued at the 40-year point. Yeah. I also have the Wright Brothers Award. I've been flying a variety of flying equipment for about 54 years.
Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what you've been flying, Pat? Can you remember the different types?
Oh my gosh, just about everything you can imagine. I've flown most every one of the single engine airplanes that was produced. I would say most of the twins. My aircraft of choice in later life, however, was the Mitsubishi Mu-2, which is a twin engine turboprop. It had gained quite a reputation as being hard to handle, which was not really true. What had happened to that airplane was a lack of proper training, and that followed it around for quite a long time. And in the 90s, the aircraft was being looked at very, very hard again until the mid 2000s. In the mid 2000s, we had a couple of fatal accidents that caused that aircraft to be scrutinized once again by the FAA. I was on the team of people working with the FAA to prove that this was not an airplane problem, and we were able to do that. As a result of that, we drew up a training program, which is now accepted by the FAA and then mandated on an annual basis. And we've taken the accident rate of that airplane down from 2 to 3 fatal accidents every year, down to only 7 fatal accidents in the last 14 years.
Fantastic. And with your ballooning competition, Pat, what's your proudest moment in competition? What's the one that always gets your heart?
Well, I guess your proudest moment in competition is when you win a national championship, and I have one too. In addition to that, when I got old enough, I was also able to compete in the senior nationals, and I have won 3 senior national championships. So those are my proudest moments. I've traveled with the U.S. team to Japan, did very well there, came in 8th place, and also to Austria, which we don't like to talk much about because that was not one of my prouder moments in ballooning.
Okay, we won't go down that route then. Are you still competing now? Do you still get involved?
No, several years ago, my wife and I are getting up there in age, and it's harder to do that. It's harder to have the kind of time commitment and also the energy that's required to be a competitive pilot. So after several years ago in Longview, Texas, I said to myself, I'm doing well in this competition. I think I came in 8th place, and I decided on the spot and announced on the spot that I was retiring from national and international competition. And I sold my balloon to the son of one of my partners in flying in the competition on the spot, and he drove away with it.
Wow. That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm still flying. I'm still flying competition, but I have a big balloon, and I don't try like I used to try for national competition, but I still do fairly well. I think that's something that goes with you as a pilot rather than with the type of balloon you fly in many cases.
Yeah. What have you got going on at the moment, Pat? What's involved in your life with ballooning and aviation, as well as, of course, being the president of the BFA, which takes quite a bit of time, but what else is going on?
That's a very an excellent question. And the reason is that the BFA as a national organization has responsibility. That responsibility is to support ballooning in all of its forms. So we have different divisions that have been created, the gas division, we have the hot air or the competition division, we have the ride division. All of these divisions are very important for us to support. And in doing so, we're trying to do several things during the time that I'm going to be president. One of those is to involve ourselves much more deeply in the education side. I'm not going to say we fell off of education, but we didn't have a number of educators on the board. I'm trying to change that. We're bringing back education for the examiners, the DPEs. We're bringing back education for those that are flight instructors. And that's a difficult thing because many people who got their commercial pilot certificate, which allows you to instruct, before the time that it was really required to be trained as an instructor. So we're renewing that training now, bringing back the manuals, bringing back the physical training in the field. In addition to that, we're having to deal with the FAA now as the fallout from the Lockhart accident, which killed 16 people in Texas in 2016. The result of that was the federal government is placing and will place a second-class medical requirement on commercial balloonists for activities that are done for compensation or hire. On that basis, we're having to work with the government now and with the aeromedical examiner to try to mitigate the damage that will be done by that. We have never had to have a medical. Balloonists have never had to have a medical. As a result, we have a lot of balloonists that have never been challenged by the physical requirements of a second-class medical.
Right.
So that may hurt us in the long run. We may see several people retire from the sport as a result of that. What we're hoping, however, is that with the advances in the aeromedical side, and for example, someone who's had a heart attack can now come back and get a second-class medical. It takes a little bit more time, and it takes a little bit more money because you're going to have some special testing that has to be done. But in the long run, there are very few things that will permanently ground someone if you're willing to take the time and put the effort in to get that medical. So we're working with the federal government to try to mitigate the damage and to lessen the overall effect to ballooning.
Yeah, it sounds like a good modernization program. With the education and the training, what format is that going to be? Is it going to be a one-on-one or PowerPoint or meetings? How are you going to do it, Pat?
Well, I think we do most everything by PowerPoint, of course. And with having come off of COVID the way we have, many meetings have been done exactly the same way you and I are doing this through our Zoom program. Yeah. And we do a lot of Zoom meetings. Some of the more intricate education, however, will be handled on a one-to-one basis as much as possible. The one in particular that I mentioned with the instructors, that's a program that should be done face-to-face because the interaction between the educated people in instructing and those that are learning is really a one-on-one process. Very hard to do online.
And what about the gas ballooning? Do you have much experience with that, Pat?
Unfortunately, I've gone through most of my life, never done gas ballooning, but while we were all standing around after one of the sessions, chit-chatting in the bar, a couple of us got really interested and decided to engage one of the more experienced gas balloonists and to begin to talk about when and how we could remove the restrictions. See, we operate on the basis of restriction. Yeah. We have ballooning limited to an airborne heater. And all we're really doing is removing the restriction of the airborne heater in order to have gas ballooning on our ticket. And that takes a couple of flights, which we can do very easily. It's a little bit more expensive than hot air ballooning, but it's worth the effort. And from some of the seminars that we sat in to talk about gas ballooning and gas ballooning records, it is really a fascinating way to fly a balloon. And so we're going to do this. At my age, I'm finally going to crack that nut.
Yeah,
get in the gas balloon and do it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, up there for 4 nights with the Gordon Bennett is the record so far. It's 96 hours, I think, off the top of my head, something like that. Incredible flight times.
They really are, and an incredible experience. Those people who have traveled around the world have had the ultimate experience, and it really is. Well, Steve Fawcett, of course, was one of them.
Yes.
Very, very well-known aviator.
Yeah. And what's coming up for you then personally this year for flying, Pat? What have you got planned? Anything?
We have my wife and I have our little group of events that we go to. Some that we have been going to for many, many years. I'm also doing Balloon Meister work in a number of events. I'm asked to put those on to come in and act as the director, and they want someone who knows safety and who knows how to operate a balloon in that environment to do that kind of work. So I have 2 or 3 events this year. Plano, of course, which has been around for many, many years. I'll be doing Natchez as a competitor. It's not real heavy competition, but it's a lot of fun. We fly back from the east to the west across the Mississippi River. Right. So they call it the Great Mississippi River Balloon Race, and it is a tremendous fun. We have been sponsored by the same family there for all of the years we've been going to the event, close to 40 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, I look forward to catching up with you a little bit later in the year and to see how it's all gone. But Pat, I want to thank you for joining us on Air Sports News. It's been a great chat. Good to learn a little bit about your life in aviation.
Well, thank you for having me, and be available to you anytime you like.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.